Good morning, everybody. Hello. It's very bright in here. I've got more lights on today. Hello, how are you? It's Wednesday. It's precisely 11 a.m, which was very specific of me and oddly not intentional for once. Welcome to the stream. I hope you all had a lovely rest of your Monday and a lovely Tuesday. I had a busy yesterday because my letter from my consultant turned up, so I suddenly had to do a metric fuck ton of disability paperwork. If you're not aware, either if you don't live with a disability or if you are in a different country, for example, there is a lot of paperwork if you want any help with your disability. And I don't just mean like with your doctors, I mean also with my university. I have to do paperwork for them. I have to do paperwork for the government to get them to help me, both with general benefits and with university related benefits. And it's a lot. And when you suddenly get diagnosed with a condition that means you can't walk very far without being in agony, you have to like go and reprove everything. So I started all of the processes for that yesterday, which was a lot, especially because I lived in the benefit system for several years, so it's quite it's related to some trauma for me. So even just sitting on hold, waiting to talk to the Department of Work and Pensions, which is that's our benefits wing of the government. Well, they do other stuff as well, but they're the people who do benefits related things. Even just being on hold, and I was on hold for 25 minutes, I think, was horrible. The person I spoke to, absolutely lovely, which is always the case. Every time I've had to speak to someone from there, they're always absolutely wonderful. The people in the system, great. The system, not so much. I do have to check something today. I know I talked yesterday also. Oh, I've started at a speed, haven't I? It's because I'm excited. I know I'm live Twitch, thanks. No, you can hear me double talking, sorry. I'll mute that. I went to check whether my captions work both on... Are you showing the caption properly? Please show me the caption properly. Oh no, they're not working at all. Oh, well, it's a good thing I looked at this, isn't it? What is going on there? What is this not using? Okay. Well, I'm glad I looked at this. Let's, I reckon it's that yeah, it's using the microphone over there that's not turned on. Please use the correct microphone. Are you now actually getting... Yes, it's actually captioning now. Okay, there we go. So what I wanted to check, sorry about all that, is whether the captions work on mobile. But I know that they only work while I'm live. So also if you are a person who needs the captions and you miss a stream but you want to watch it, I'm uploading them to YouTube the day after. YouTube then auto captions it. I don't know how long it takes YouTube to auto caption, but that is an option. Oh, it's really cool on mobile. I'm discovering things about my captioner. This is basically, I know it's not an amazing captioner, because it's automatic, so it's never going to be as good as, you know, a person live captioning, which is the where am I? Oh, there we go. Cool, awesome. Yeah, it's working. But I have it at all, which is awesome. And actually it's really not that bad. I know it struggles with some of like the more technical terms. It really hates names. It's not cool on names. It's made me appear to say some truly terrible things, but I actually found that quite funny. Anyway, cool. That is all work. Thanks, webcam. That is all working. That is the thing I wanted to check before we started. I'm going to get rid of the duplicate me now because I needed that for a bit longer. Hello, welcome to the stream. Let's pretend this is the actual start of the stream and I didn't just like anytime webcam. I thought I turned autofocus off, but it seems to repeatedly turn itself back on. I think it turns itself on like anytime I update a driver or anything like that. It goes, oh, you wanted autofocus, right? And I'm like, I really didn't, but okay. So hello, it's Wednesday. We're gonna do some reading today. I'm gonna be reading a book, shockingly. So this is one of my books that I've got stocked up. I'm gonna get more books for Christmas. I'm delighted about this. I'm hoping I get more books for Christmas. So I've got this and a few others. So this is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It is a little bit controversial in the sense that it's been recommended a lot amongst the trauma and mental health community, but it's super triggering for a lot of people. It describes traumatic events in a lot of clear detail, not in a gratuitous way, because it's literally about trauma, but in a graphic way, and it doesn't hold back on the severity of anything, which does mean it can be quite intense to read. So I'm not that far in, I'm this far in. I really recommend it, but I don't recommend it if it's going to trigger you. Please look after yourselves and read things appropriately. I might be discussing some of its content. I put this warning on Twitter as well. If I do, I will always prepend what I'm about to discuss with a warning, just in case it goes into discussing anything significant. Obviously, you know what your triggers are, so please, I'm not going to be offended if you go away. Please go away if it's to look after yourself. And that is the case for everything, because my research is in trauma, because any research into mental health means that you research trauma, basically, for at least a large portion of it, just because of the things that cause mental illness. And that means that sometimes the stuff I discuss is going to be triggering for people, and I don't want to not discuss that, because I think it's, I'm partly here to educate people as to what my research is about. So I want to make sure that I am discussing all aspects of it here. But I also want to make sure it's a safe place for people, and that they get the warnings that they need to be able to leave. But for example, I know I've got some triggers that are really weird and obscure and no one would ever warn for them, and I wouldn't expect them to. And if they come up on streams, I just leave, and that's fine here as well. I just wanted to put that out there as a disclaimer. I'm thinking of putting something in my panels, especially next month when I actually get into studying and I'm going to be talking more about my PhD specifically. I'm going to put a sort of disclaimer of, we discuss some difficult topics here, just make sure you look after yourselves. I'm going to put something like that in there. I'm just rambling now. I hope you're all here for rambling, because if you are, you've come to the right place. This is just 6 hours a week of me rambling. But yeah, so my plan today is to do 3 20-minute bursts of reading, and we will have 10-minute breaks in between. So if you are working or studying and wanting to follow along, so you don't have to be reading the same book. You could be reading the same book. It would be a bit weird and coincidental, but if you're reading the same book, awesome. So you are welcome to study along with me, work with me. I will be muted as usual whilst I'm doing the reading. Yes, we're just going to do 3, I think, because I realised that I like 2-hour streams is perfect for me. Anything beyond 2 hours and I start to struggle. You'll have noticed in 2-hour streams I have to get up several times and move around because my body seizes up, and I have been in a lot more pain this week. I think it's the stress of going back to everything after being off on holiday, so I'm not too worried about it. But so yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that on my end, I'm careful. So 2 hours is perfect for me. It feels really nice. And I think it's very different when I in this sort of stream versus a traditional stream with people gaming. Because if you're gaming, by the time you've done like an intro discussion and then got into the game, you've probably not done that much of the game, whereas with this we get quite a lot done in a more compressed time, even with me rambling. So yeah, that's sort of where we're looking at, and that works well because we get obviously that's only an hour worth, but then by the time I've rambled for 20 minutes at the start, we've had all of our breaks, at least one of which runs long because someone asks me a question and I get interested in things. When I had no viewers, this didn't happen. When there was no one here, I could just happily stick to a rigid schedule, and now every time I'm on minute 9 of a break and someone comes in and goes, "Hey, what's your research in?" and I get really excited and happy vent about my research. So yeah, also I didn't talk about my reading group on Monday. And I wanted to actually, because that's important, so I'm gonna breathe. If you are new here, I have chronic anxiety, so I often talk super fast. That is a product of my anxiety. Also that I'm really excited and interested in the things I'm talking about, and they sort of mesh together. And I have a tendency to become... So I described it recently as I've got 2 spaces. I've got an upper space, which is my thinking brain and my my academic brain and the sort of analytical side. And if I get stuck in there, I get and the anxiety, and I get sort of super hyper if I'm up there. And then you sort of got the lower register, as it were, which is where my physical sensation is my pain. So if I get stuck in, and I think my depression actually is in that lower bit as well, and general some other emotions, lower simmering emotions rather than things like excitement and that sort of thing. So I can get stuck in that upper register, and that means that I then don't notice things in the lower register. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone. It made sense to my therapist, so, you know, at least one person in the world understands what I'm saying. But yeah, so you will catch me saying, oh god, I'm talking too fast. It's not that it's not that I'm self-conscious about it. I am self-conscious about it, but it's not that I don't think it's a problem if you're a person that talks quickly. It's a problem for me because I then fail to notice how anxious I am as well. It's always like I get stuck up there and then I can't tell I am at the same time. So I'm just going to take a deep breath. I'm going to tell you about Monday, because after I streamed, I had an hour break, which was not enough. And then I went into my reading group, which I'd done the reading for in the stream, the poetry book I was reading, and we had one of the authors there, and she talked about it, but so the creative writing team at my university are amazing. They are like a proper family, because anytime there is a creative writing event and one of them is represented there, they all descend upon it. Like, I don't think I've ever been to one of those events and not seen the head of creative writing and at least 3 other staff members there. They're all amazing. And we had it was one of the creative writing PhDs reading. So there were 15 people there. And I was already quite on edge. So I didn't put my camera on. I didn't put my microphone on. I did talk, but I talked in the chat on Zoom. And I'm really glad that I felt able to do that. I'm very aware that there are people who have like Zooms where they're not allowed to have their camera off or have their microphone off. I have been in one of them where we were told that we had to put our microphones on at one point, and I left before that happened. I think this is one of the things of it's an accessibility thing that doesn't get thought of, is how horrible it can be to participate in. I basically have a limit. I think once it gets over 8 or so people, I really start to struggle. Or it can be less than that if it's people I don't know. Like the normal reading group, there's about 6 to 8 of us each week, and I know all of them. I maybe don't know 1 or 2 each week. So generally I'm fine. But this week it was just a bit much. And it was the first day, and I found that my anxiety levels were super high. It was quite unpleasant. Weirdly, I did the stream. I felt lovely streaming. I don't know. And I'm a bit anxious again now. But this is my biggest thing I'm doing today. I'm doing another study session this afternoon off stream. Because I'm trying to make sure I get a balance of both. And that also that the majority of my working time is focused on studying, because that's the thing that I love. It's my career. It's the thing I want to put the majority of my time into. And I have limited time. What I'm doing in that study session, I'm not really sure. But yeah. So what are we at? We're at 20 minutes. So let's. Also, I will work on this. But currently the reason you get a blank screen in the middle is that I've got 2 different sources for my webcam. There's probably a better way to do this. This is the way I've done it. You have the full webcam, which is the one that isn't cropped to this size. And then you have this one, which is cropped. There are many better ways to do this. This is the way it's working right now. And if I go straight from one to the other, my webcam's like, oh no, sorry, I'm still being used over there. And then it just doesn't come on. Also, I think today I may have got the what's it called? Keyboard shortcuts. That's the word I'm looking for. Working for the timer. So we'll see. I have to remember to reset it after we've used it. But yeah, so we are gonna, actually I'm gonna calm down first. I'm not gonna rush straight into a study session. I'm so in awe of all of the streamers I watch who are just so much more chill. Or it feels to me, I'm sure they're not. I'm sure that we're all ducks and we look chill on the surface, and under the water there's a lot of frantic paddling happening. But you know, it's always easier to see that in other people than it is to see that in yourself. So, that's better. I'm taking some breaths. The thing with this book is, and I'm only going to flash it at you because there you go. So you can see the text is really small. So it might not look like a massive book, but actually it's pretty massive when you consider how dense the text is. I promise I slept. I slept quite well. You wouldn't know. All right, let's do this. Let's get into our first session. So as always, and as described below, it will be a 20-minute study session. I will be muted whilst I'm studying. You will get the lovely lo-fi music in the background, which for some reason keeps getting muted on Twitch, even though Harris Heller's music is fine. I don't understand what's happening. It keeps getting muted when I'm in my study sessions at least, so it's not a huge problem. It's not getting muted on YouTube, so if you end up wanting to use these to study with, it's on YouTube, and I will actually start linking my YouTube in places as well, because whilst I was using it just as an archive, it's actually really useful for accessibility because it's got the permanent captions and that sort of thing. And also some people just prefer to watch on YouTube because they might, you know, have no ads on YouTube but not be subbed here. So yeah, I'm gonna start the timer, and I will be back in 20 minutes. Well, I won't go anywhere. I'll be here. You can literally watch me read a book. It sounds really weird when I put it like that. Please sit and watch me read a book. Yeah, so I will start this, and I will see you in 20 minutes. Good luck with what you're studying, and we'll have a 10-minute break when that's over. Oh, it worked! Yay! All right, see you soon. Hello. How's it going? I put that way too high up. There we go. I realised that it looked a bit weird to people coming in, that you could see like just one corner of my book, which is why I tilted the camera down a bit so you could actually see what I was doing. How'd it go? That was really interesting. The first 5 minutes of that, I was so aware of what time it was, so aware of how much was like left to go still, and really like I think it was still being like on edge from the anxiety I'd had before, and like then I just started to get into what I was reading. What's the medical humanities? I have a command for that will tell you. There you go. I get asked that a lot. It's a relatively new field of study. It's only probably 50 years old at most. Not that the ideas in it are new, but sort of like the formation of it as a field is a lot newer. But yeah, basically it's looking at the interaction and intersectionality between healthcare and medicine and the humanities and the social sciences. And what I'm doing for my PhD, oh, here we go. I've got another command for this. Can you tell I get asked these a lot? So basically, and I'm still learning to tell this in a short version, so bear with me. There is a theory in illness narratives, which is stories about illness, so memoirs, things like that, any sort of writing that's about a person's experience of living with illness. There is a theory that there's different kinds of narrative in that, and there's one that's called a chaos narrative, which is often attributed to things like chronic illness, terminal illness, any illness that isn't going to have like the arc of I wasn't ill, then I became ill, and then I recovered. And that's especially the case with mental illness, which is what I focus on. So I'm looking at how writing about mental illness breaks down traditional narrative form in order to better articulate and more authentically articulate the lived experience of illness. That was really good. I did really well with that one there. Also, hello Montrebel, welcome in. Thank you for asking questions. I'm very happy to talk about what I'm researching because I'm really excited about it. It was really good, wasn't it? It's such a hard thing to explain because I'm very conscious that I don't want to use terms that are really specific and people won't be familiar of. How will I conduct my research? Oh, that's a very good question. I don't really know yet. I didn't put the timer on for the break, so I'm going to do that now. So the first thing that I will do to start with is just read a lot. That's what I'm doing already. I'm reading a lot around both like specifically my you finally asked a question I don't have a command for. There you go. So I'm doing a mixture of like analysis of text and textual analysis and theoretical analysis. It's a bit of it's partially a phenomenological approach. I hate saying that word. Which is like thinking about how we think about it, but also then looking at how it's actually done. The really exciting thing about doing a PhD is that it's not like I don't have set guidance for how I have to do things. I'm sort of the point is me finding how I want to do things and working on that. So my plan initially, yes, I'm actually very specifically looking at texts from the past 20 years. And the reason I'm looking at the past 20 years is that I have a hypothesis that I want to examine that the prevalence of the internet massively changed the availability of non-standard narrative form. It's not like really specific. It's like it's basically internet era, but internet era in the sense of not when the internet was created, but when we got to the point where everyone had access to the internet. And I use that everyone very generally, because obviously not everyone has access to the internet. Because I think from the point of view of, so like before that, to get anything published, you pretty much had to go through traditional publication, be it in like long form or in like through journalism, all that sort of thing, or you were making zines. So anything that you were creating was edited and was curated and was almost certainly held to that specific expectation of recovery that a lot of illness narratives are. It's super interesting, as you can tell from how pleased I am to be talking about it. And I think basically and also you then bear in mind that in that sort of traditional publishing sphere, if you weren't a certain kind of person, you know, white, male and well off, the further you got from that, the harder it was for you to get your experiences published. We also didn't talk about mental health as much before that. The prevalence of the internet occurs concurrently with the mental health awareness and mental health stigma movements, which is really interesting. I want to look at how that has affected it as well. So looking at, because basically the internet meant that anyone could publish anything at that point. Doing a PhD in chemical engineering, I'm jealous of how you can talk about your area of research to others. It's really interesting to me to learn about research in other fields. Yes, I've had exactly the same thing. Talking to people doing any kind of PhD is really, really interesting to me to see how different they are, and how, especially questions of methodology, because you go from one like overarching department to the other, like you go from the sciences to the social sciences to the humanities and or into the arts, and how people approach questions of methodology is massively different. And that's really interesting, and that's actually one of the things that the medical humanities critiques is the use of methodology in medicine, in humanities, in social sciences, in everything, and posits the idea that if we can use, because for example, if you just work in chemical engineering, you might not be exposed to social sciences methodology, but that could be really useful for you, and sort of it's that intersectionality of learning from each other. Why are you studying the humanities as a disabled researcher? Is that you researching disabled people, or are you disabled in some way? It's both. And I believe very strongly, especially because I specifically study the lived and embodied experience of illness, I think it's really important that research is led by people that have experience of that illness. Not that it's only made by them, but at the moment there's not as strong as I'd like a push for people to say, I'd like to research this because I have a related illness. So I have trauma-triggered depression and anxiety, and I have done for more of my life than I haven't had it now. And I also have fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain condition that also causes some neurological problems, like insomnia, brain fog, or fibrofog as it's called, when related to fibromyalgia, but basically concentration issues, which is weirdly why streaming is really helpful, because doing it in compressed bursts and then having a camera on me for some reason makes it much easier for me to study. I don't know why. But yeah, so it is both, because I'm also studying people who have experience of mental illness, and I'm often, a lot of the writing that I'm looking at tends to be from people who have chronic mental illness rather than, an acute burst of depression, for example. I'm looking more at people whose stories last longer, but not exclusively either. I think it's just like that. The longer you have something, the more likely you are to write about it, I think, is the thing. And yeah, I went to a lecture last year by an autistic researcher who was arguing for the same thing. It really changed how I was thinking about disabled-led research. In regular medical studies, it's a common issue to get the people involved in the studies to take the medicine they prescribe to take. Is it a problem to get people with medical issues to properly document their illness? So that's a really interesting question, because one of the related problems to that is that in a lot of medicine, the patient's point of view and the patient's account of their illness isn't high on the priority list of evidence. In mental illness is a little bit different because obviously there's you don't go and get a blood test to tell you if you have PTSD. It's done based on your expression of your experience and what you're presenting with. But in physical illnesses or other illnesses, like some neurological illnesses and things like that, which can cross over with mental illness, you mostly get a load of tests done and they use that as a way to diagnose you. And the patient's account of their experience of illness is deprioritized in comparison. Now, there is a movement called narrative medicine, which seeks, and that's a medical humanities movement, which seeks to balance that out and to increase the significance placed on the patient's narrative, and aims to educate both physicians and patients in how to articulate that narrative and extract it. And some of the tools that they use aren't like traditional journaling or things like that. It can be like smaller writing prompts and things like that. It's really interesting. So it is a problem, but it's as much a problem with the institution of medicine, if you see what I mean, as much as it is a problem with like getting the patients to do it. The patients are conditioned to think that their point of view isn't as significant because of that wider structural issue in medicine. So yeah, that's a really interesting question. Thank you. I am noticing that we've got 20 seconds left in the break. Yes, exactly. A lot of the symptoms of mental health are subjective and they vary. And one of the reasons that it's important to, and this is gonna bleep in a second, 1 second. So one of the reasons it's important to listen to that lived experience is to understand that symptoms vary, because listening to how they vary can help. And also for some conditions, the fact that like the pain goes away at certain times, or at certain times you're feeling better, that's as useful a piece of information from a diagnostic point of view as knowing what the symptom is in the first place. But also there's a lot of problems with how mental illness is categorized and diagnosed, which I'm not going to get into now because I will rant about that for 20 minutes. Thank you very much for following. I'm going to reset the timer. That's all right. Thank you for asking them. I love answering questions because that's like a lot of the reason that I'm doing this and I'm here is to, I don't like the term raise awareness, but I mean raise awareness to show people what research is happening in the medical humanities, because I'd also like to mention that I hadn't heard of the medical humanities more than 14 months ago, when I went to start my master's degree in creative writing, and I had optional modules, and I went, oh, what's the medical humanities? I've never heard of this before. My background is actually in literature, and especially in Shakespeare and queer and feminist theory. So yeah, my master's is in creative writing. I've just finished a dissertation on the embodied experience of live action role playing and how it informs healing from trauma. So I've got a very varied background that I'm coming from, which actually I think is really helpful, because it means that I can pull in all of these different things. No, it's okay. No, it's fine. I'm going to go into my study burst now so I can keep reading my book. But it has been absolutely lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for being here. And if you want to study along, I'll be back in 20 minutes. And just sort of alternating between the two. So thank you for being here, and I will see you in 20 minutes. If this is going to work this time. Yay! Oh. What am I reading? What am I listening to? What we are listening to is Stream Beats by Harris Heller, which is a playlist that's on Spotify that anyone... Oh, I know I've done. You can't hear me? That's weird because everything looks fine on my end. Yeah, it definitely looks like you muted me. Cool. Yeah, so we're listening to come on, webcam. Okay. We're listening to the Stream Beats playlist by Harris Heller, which is DRM free music. He is a YouTuber and a streamer who's made his music available to anyone to use on either platform. It's just a nice way to not have DMCA issues. And what I am reading is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I mentioned this at the beginning of the stream. It's a book about trauma and the relationship between mind, brain and body. And it's incredibly good. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to people who have experienced trauma, because a lot of it is very explicit, not in a gratuitous way, but there are lots of case studies that give examples, and he frequently gives examples that could in themselves be triggering for people. So it's an absolutely incredible book, but it may not be something that everyone can read. What I'm reading, the part I'm reading at the moment, I mean, I'm on chapter 6 of, how many are there? 20. And mostly at the moment I'm reading about like the early history of the study of traumatic stress, and specifically what the brain does in traumatic stress, which is super interesting. It's, yeah, just the depth of what we understand, and a lot of this is stuff that I kind of knew, but the thing is that a lot of it, especially Van der Kolk's perspective on things, hasn't reached like general understanding. Like, you know how everyone knows that the left brain and the right brain do different things, in the way that sort of has reached everyone's like general understanding. A lot of this hasn't, and so it's super interesting to look at. And there's things in here that I knew about, like I knew about mirror neurons, but having them sort of contextualized in terms of trauma is really interesting. And like, I know about dissociation and depersonalization, but reading about what's actually happening in the brain when those happen, and looking at it had in that section, it had fMRI scans of 2 people and showing the difference between dissociation and depersonalization. Dissociation is basically when things get jumbled in the brain and lose their attachment to things, whereas depersonalization is a complete absence of anything. And you can literally see that in these scans. It's super interesting. And this was 2 people who went through the same trauma. But the difference is that one of them had experienced trauma previously, and had learned to shut down their brain. Basically what happens with, and none of this, I'm going to discuss this very generally, so none of this should be triggering. When you experience trauma, especially if you experience it when your brain is still developing, and bearing in mind that the brain continues developing until your mid-20s, that's a lot of your life. It's not just what we think of as childhood. If you experience trauma in that period, your brain learns to respond in the way that it responds during that trauma, especially if the trauma is long term and not, but even if it's a single incident of trauma, often what happens is that the consequence of the traumatic event and where people are reliving it is worse than the trauma itself, because the trauma itself, the incident itself, had an end, whereas it continues to replay. And basically all of the different parts of your brain that are related to what you often think of as the fight or flight system, there's like actually 6 or so different regions of the brain. This is what I've been reading, by the way. This is I'm not suddenly an expert. That was me starting the timer because I forgot to again. But and they all do different things in terms of what they're interpreting. So you've got one part that judges like the size of the threat, and then another that sort of starts responding to it and that sort of thing. And it's really it's just so interesting. Again, a lot of it I vaguely knew, but I hadn't like fully internalized to this degree. The really interesting thing for me, like from a personal point of view, is that because your brain controls everything in your body, when something like that happens to your brain, it can affect other systems in your body. So for example, when you're going through a fight or flight response, one of the things that your body will do is shut down your digestion system, basically so it's not wasting energy continuing to digest when it needs to be helping you run away or whatever. And that can actually lead to people who have experienced trauma then having IBS, or some kind of digestion problem. In the same way, that's one of the origins, or what we think one of the origins of fibromyalgia is. So a really quick explanation of fibromyalgia, which is the chronic pain condition I have, is that the brain doesn't know how to interpret pain properly, and misinterprets it. So there are what's known as tender points, and there's, I want to say 9 of them, that are at different points on the body. So there's, I think there's 2 here, there's 2 on the side of the hips, there's 2 like either side of your spine in your lower back, and there's a few more, like I think there's sort of like a little arc of them around the top of your shoulders, like sort of around here. And in fibromyalgia, those points are incredibly tender. I have times where lightly brushing the side of my hip is agonizing, which makes no sense. And the reason it makes no sense is that it comes from the brain learning to interpret pain in a certain way. And because it then misinterprets that, you then have all the knock-on effects. So for example, one of the things that happens with fibro is that my sleep isn't as refreshing as it should be, because my brain can't process sleep properly, and you can get digestion issues from fibromyalgia. You can get all sorts of different things. The brain fog and stuff like that all comes from the basically bits of the brain misinterpreting things. In a similar way to how anxiety disorders are your brain seeing something as a threat when it's not, and that you then get all the knock-on effects from that. And it's so interesting to see this discussed so holistically, and looking at, because so basically in psychiatry, for the most part, there was a sudden movement towards studying the biological and chemical aspects of it, especially when the pharmacological movement occurred in the 80s, where suddenly we started developing drugs that could be used to treat mental illness. And we completely like before that, we were very focused in talking therapy, in what we would now consider mindfulness, in starting to understand trauma, because after World War I and World War II, our understanding of traumatic stress developed very rapidly because we had a lot of examples to study, which is unpleasant. So basically, psychiatry was going that way, and then suddenly all of these pharmacological solutions came in, and it wildly deviated towards, okay, let's focus on the chemical reactions that are occurring here, which for many people works, but it doesn't necessarily address this sort of thing where the brain has relearned something through trauma, because that might not be, there are drug-based solutions that do that, but they're not aimed at this specifically. And in one of the sections I was reading, he was describing how there's, is it top down or bottom up? Yeah. To target different parts of the brain, to reteach it how to regulate traumatic stress. And also that a lot of psychiatry is trauma-based psychiatry is focused on understanding the trauma that happened, whereas what Van der Kolk is saying is that the most important thing is what's occurring now and how the brain is processing things now. It's too late to undo that the brain has learned things this way. We need to focus on and like attend to what's happening right now instead, which goes very much with my experience of healing and my understanding of it. And it's so lovely to see, such a holistic take on things, because it's what I think is the solution. I don't think there's one solution for everything, but I definitely think it's important to look at every part of things. So yeah, it's super interesting. It is hard work reading it, because I haven't done any sciences since GCSE, which if you're not British, is the exams you take when you're 16. I could have continued. I did very well in them. I dropped all of my sciences, however, and I went wholly into arts and humanities. So it's interesting, but actually it's a lovely, it's not making me feel ignorant when I'm reading it. And I quite like popular science books, and I especially like them because it's a way to read about biological theory that isn't going to make me feel awful, and that like I'm a terrible failure of a person for not knowing all of these terms. It seems like you don't need to know all the specific science behind the illnesses. No, I don't think you do, but I think the reason this science behind it is interesting is that by understanding it, we can reimagine and reassess our understanding of traumatic illness as a whole, in a way that will be beneficial to helping people live with that traumatic illness, traumatic stress. So yeah, I think it's not so much that it's necessary in a structural way, more than, anyone who has traumatic stress should read this book and understand what's going on in their brain. They don't need to. But like the systems we have for offering treatment, and for even just like the way pharmacological research is directed and that sort of thing, it is important for those structures to understand the significance of the effect of the mind on the body and so forth. So because I think often when you present with a mental illness and you go to your doctor and you say, I think something is wrong, they will focus on asking you about the criteria that the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Manual for Mental Illness, they will focus on the markers in that. And for the most part, the DSM doesn't include any what you would consider physical symptoms. However, there are a lot of physical symptoms of mental illness because of this relationship and because of the fact that, like, I know lots of people who have anxiety and depression and then have digestion issues. That's from that example that I was giving earlier. So I think by the way, I should have the disclaimer that I hate the DSM and the categorization system for mental illness. So take my opinion skewed by that. I won't get into that. Why? Because again, the time is about to go off. And also, I've done that rant like 20 times on this channel. We don't need it again. But yeah, so it's a structural thing, basically. It needs to rework things from the top down. I should go back to reading. This will be our last Pomodoro session for today, because I am starting to have trouble sitting in a chair. So in fact, I'm actually going to start this study time by standing up and moving around again. But I will be back on Friday. We can talk more about that afterwards. I'm just dithering now. I'm going to go back to reading, and my camera might focus at some point. There we go. All right, I will. Oh no, I didn't reset it. That's why. There we go. It's going to work now. Brilliant. I will see you in 20 minutes. I looked up when it had a minute to go and went, oh, it's almost time. I'll just finish reading this section I'm on. And then I got engrossed in it. That's a good thing. Okay. Wow, my hip's very painful. I don't know if I've just noticed it where I've moved then, or if it was doing it before and I just hadn't. Yeah. Okay, I made so many notes that on that bit. There was a lot that was really relevant. I discovered a word that I've never known before, which is alexithymia, which is having no words for your feelings. And I feel very seen by this book. And it's the inability to articulate them and to engage with them. And it was really interesting because he highlighted how a lot of the drugs that are given to people with mental illness have an effect of dampening emotion or sensation. And if you do that to someone who doesn't know how to, doesn't have a balance of regulation in their brain and their body, you just make it worse because you've just made it harder for them to access the stuff they already can't access. And it's not that, like he was talking about how people they'll look angry, like their face, because your facial expressions are controlled by a bit of the brain that's sort of more instinctual, you might say. So before you're consciously aware that you're angry, your face will have creased up in anger. So what happens is that patients look super angry and then go, no, I don't feel anything. Because at some point in that's where the bit of their brain that interprets the feeling hasn't turned on, but the bit that reacts to it has. So that's super interesting because you've just made it even harder for them to turn that processing, sense-making bit back on. Let's go to... Yeah, when my face is bigger. Yeah, so it was really, really interesting. I also found that bit quite hard to read. I think that's the most... there was a sentence that I really attached to and felt resonated with me, which was, and I'm going to discuss this in general terms. I'm not going to go through specifics here. Traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies, and that I'm very familiar with that and the sense that of never being safe. I had a breakthrough in therapy earlier this year where I realised that was the case. It really annoys me that I can't remember the name of this technique, but it's a memory and visualization technique where my therapist took me through. We noticed that I was feeling something really strongly, and I had this alexithymia and couldn't express what it was. And she said, what does it make you think of? And it really vividly gave me a very specific memory that I actually then wrote about in my dissertation, of having a panic attack in the bathroom at a job that I was working at, and did not work out for very long because I had multiple panic attacks a day for a week, and I think I lasted 2 weeks. I think I might have done 2 weeks. And I went very abruptly into what I now understand was basically a flashback. I don't get flashbacks a lot, but I had one in this instance, and we were talking through what I was seeing and experiencing. And it was through talking through this random memory that I had that I suddenly identified that the problem was that I didn't feel safe. And that was the feeling I'd been experiencing in the session. And then I came to realize that that's the feeling I'm experiencing all the time. So this section that I just read in particular had, a lot of stuff that was really, really relevant to me. And it's interesting. I find it hard to read in the sense that it's kind of hard hitting. It's not fully triggering for me, or that it wasn't in this instance, but I definitely had an emotional reaction to it, and felt myself. I think the thing is that because I feel validated by it as much as I feel upset by it, that sort of balances itself out. And I am at a place where I am more able to regulate my emotional reactions to things and my general existence. I just can't do it all the time. And it's very easy to slip back into those traumatic patterns. So it was really interesting having that reaction and being able to work through it. As well as the fact that what I was reading was very interesting. And that's something that is very, very new, relatively. I think really in the past, I think about 5 years ago, I had a course of therapy where we worked on getting me better access to my emotions. And that was like the groundwork for being able to do the work that I've done in this year and to an extent last year, but mostly this year, to be honest with you. It's been a bit of a year. It's very strange. Like, this has simultaneously been the worst year of my life and also probably one of the most profoundly impactful years of my life. So, and I know a few other people who've had similar experiences where things are going very well and very badly simultaneously, and it's quite hard to hold both of those things at the same time and to understand that they both exist and they're both true and they're not invalidating each other by their existence. But yeah, so that's where we're going to leave it today. I was going to talk a little more about what we're doing on Friday. So my plan, whilst we are in this interstitial time before my PhD starts. My PhD starts on the 18th of January. I looked it up, or accidentally looked it up the other day. So until then, we're in this sort of weird in between. Every Friday, I am going to be continuing to digitize all of my notes. This is something I've done on stream before a while ago. But basically, I take all of my notes on paper because I process it much better that way. I learn it much better that way. And then I type them up so that I can then search them easier later on, so that I don't have to read through 4 notebooks to find where I once made a note about dissociation. And that's something that I've not done historically. So currently what I'm working on doing is all of the reading I've done for prepping my PhD proposal, and all the reading I did this year as part of my medical humanities and disability courses, all of the reading I'm doing now, and I'm trying to catch up so that then I will have the routine of digitizing notes on a Friday, and what I will do is every Friday I will digitize the notes from that week so that it will then be caught up and it will constantly be there. So that's what we will be doing then. I might have that up on screen. I haven't decided yet whether I want to do it in the same way we do this, where I'm completely muted and typing away and you can't see it, or whether I want to show it on stream. I don't know. I'm conscious that some of the things that I'm writing about are triggering and people don't want to walk in and see discussion of certain things on the screen. One thing that I've seen that other productivity streamers do, is random dropping around streams procrastinates for a fellow PhD buddy. Good luck, have fun, it's a journey and something. Try to relax as much as possible before the storm years, you'll do fine. Thank you so much, Villinger. I'm like a month and a half off starting now, but honestly, having seen how like the process of applying and of writing my proposal and rewriting my proposal and doing submissions for funding and everything like that, I think my PhD proposal is the most stressful thing I've ever done. So I can only imagine what it's going to be like when I actually start. Thank you very much for the well wishes, and I hope things are going well for you as well. It's a very weird time to be studying anything. I was talking earlier, I was asked what sort of things I will be doing when I start, and I don't know how I'm going to start doing a literature review with no library, so it's gonna be interesting, especially because some of the texts that I'm studying are physical objects that are one of a kind that I have to go in and handle, so that's going to be particularly weird. But yes, what I was saying in terms of my note-taking streams, note writing streams, note digitizing, something I've seen other people do is they have it on screen but very slightly blurred, so you can't read the text, but you sort of like are present in the sense of seeing the person's work progress, which I surprisingly liked. I thought it was going to annoy me, but I saw someone do it in a writing stream, and it was actually quite nice, and I can see that being a thing. Like if I'm on camera, if I try it and like it, it's something I could do in the future when we get into the PhD itself, and I want to do writing sessions, but I don't necessarily want to show people what I'm writing as I'm writing it, because I find that horrible. I get uncomfortable if I've got something I'm writing up on screen. It can be the most innocuous thing, it can be anything. If I have that up on screen and then my husband walks in, I close it and I'm like, don't look at this. It doesn't matter what it is, it's utterly irrelevant. I'm just really self-conscious about someone reading my writing as I'm doing it. So we might try that. I'll see if I can get that set up tomorrow and have a play around and see how that looks. And as with many of the things we're doing here, we might try it and see how it goes, and if it works, awesome, and if it doesn't, then we won't do it again. But I am going to end there. I really need to stand up and move around and stretch properly and eat something, and look away from a screen. So thank you all so much for being here today. It has been absolutely lovely. I've had a wonderful time. And I will be back on Friday at 11 AM GMT at the same time. Twitch has this wonderful thing now where my stream schedule is down below, and Twitch does the time zone calculation for you. So if you're in a different time zone and you're looking at it, then Twitch will sort it out for you and you don't have to worry. I sometimes do deviate very slightly from that because of my disability. If I wake up on a stream day and I'm in copious pain, then I might need to stream a bit late or for less time or whatever. I will always update on Twitter with what's happening. And Twitter also will give you much more reliable go live notifications than Twitch will. But do follow and put notifications on, because Twitch does notify you eventually. For me, it tends to do it like 15 or 20 minutes into a stream that I have notifications on for, which is better than nothing, I suppose. So yeah, thank you all very much for coming and for being here, and I will see you again on Friday. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day and a lovely tomorrow. Please take care of yourselves. Bye.